Hello, my beautiful people. How are you? Listen, spring is in the air, and I feel like spring inspires me to explore more. And that concerns many things in my life, but mostly I like to explore new books. Among those books are classics. I don't know about you, but I've been afraid of classics for a pretty long time before I eventually started reading them. Mostly because most of them are long, boring, and not pertinent. And I think these are three main reasons why people are afraid of classics in general. In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 classic books that remind me of spring and that will leave you feeling refreshed, rejuvenated, and who knows, maybe they'll change your life. I decided to separate this series into many parts because turns out there are many classic novels I want to talk about. So if you would like a part 2, let me know. I would love to talk about more books, and without further ado, let's jump into it. As I mentioned before, I was pretty much avoiding classics for most of my life, mainly because I started my journey with Emily Bronte and with Wuthering Heights, and I did not like it, and I felt deceived, disappointed, and so I did not lay my hands on a classic for a pretty long time. However, I then stumbled across Jane Austen, and let me tell you, Jane Austen completely changed my perspective on classics, and she's one of the reasons why I overcame that fear of reading classic books. Her novels feel like a walk in a blooming garden. You find yourself absorbed in this magical tale of romance and love, and mind you, I'm not a person who likes to read romance books. I mentioned that quite a lot on my channel. I'm not a fan of love stories, but when a love story is executed with balance and it's charming and has its own wit, I can definitely appreciate it. And that's why Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen is one of my favorite classic books ever. We follow 2 sisters, Mary Ann and Eleanor. They represent 2 absolute opposites. One, Eleanor, represents sense, and Mary Ann is very romantic, very dreamy, and that's why she is sensitive. And she represents thus sensibility. Both of them fall in love, though very differently. This story explores the tension between the romantic exploration but also social conventions. We see how Marian falls in love and suffers because of her sensibility, whereas Eleanor, a complete opposite, is struggling with her love life because of her sense. Both of them are so completely different, yet being sisters, they help each other out and they mature and they grow, and we follow their journey and we see how they are slowly becoming less of girls and more of women, and how they navigate through this world of adult passions. This book brilliantly depicts a society where true love doesn't really count for anything. Instead, what people are striving for are money, status, and marriages that are built on these very things. I think this book perfectly blends the countryside life and the city life, and we get a glimpse of both of them and we see how different each of them are. And through the opposition between the sisters, we see how differently people can approach life and still be dissatisfied with it and still find it hard to engage in relationships. Personally, I feel quite sentimental about this book because this book was given to me by my sister, and this definitely felt like an intimate talk with an older sister. And although I might not be very familiar with that feeling, I felt like I was sitting in a garden with a cup of tea and my sister was giving me advice on life in general and on how to navigate through my passions. I found the character of Marian more relatable than Eleanor, probably because I'm a very sensitive person. And Marian is very passionate, she's very emotional, and she's very melancholic, and I just love her. Her character spoke to me and I related to her. That was one of the reasons why I love that book. Characters seem alive to you and they're so vivid. I just loved every bit of it, and I cannot recommend it enough. Next book on my list is A Room with a View And I've heard many wonderful things about this book before eventually getting to read it. And because this book was short, I was less afraid to read it. This was a very good read, especially for springtime. Let me tell you why. Edward Forster is a brilliant lyrical writer. The way he describes the landscape of Italy, especially of Florence, you want to go travel to Italy so bad after reading this book. You want to be strolling among the little houses on these streets filled with tourists, discovering monuments, churches, pastries, and good food, as well as wine, of course. And this is exactly what Lucy, the main character in this book, did for most of the time. The rest of the time, she spent pondering over how different this Italian world and this Italian landscape, as well as its inhabitants, is from her own home, which is England. This is a brilliant satire of the English society and of its snobiety of the 20th century. Lucy is a young girl who travels around Italy with her cousin. She stays at a hotel, and during the stay she meets different people, her companions. Among those companions there's a young gentleman who charms her and eventually finds a way to her heart. And through this newfound passion among the landscape of Italy, Lucy finds herself wondering about the limits of the world. Her neatly order of quiet life drastically shifts. Being a middle-class lady, she finds herself wondering what it's like to not strive towards money, status. You can probably tell that in most of the classic novels, we find this opposition between true love and simplistic way of life, and striving for power and the world of high ambitions. Here we find it too. Because Lucy is so young and unexperienced, she finds herself immersed into this landscape of rural beauty, and she never wants to go back to England. She never wants to go back to this neat order of Edwardian society. She finds herself striving eventually for a completely different future. And I found this book completely charming, yet also it's poignant. I found this book a perfect spring read because it's quite short and you can finish it during your spring break, but also because it is an illuminative account of how did the society of England of the 20th century approach love, and the dynamics between social classes are captured with such precision that you are truly mesmerized, yet also painfully aware that even in our world, we have those societal expectations. And sadly, these same expectations and conventions still govern our personal life. I found this book easy to get through, fast-paced, and because of the beautiful descriptions, you do not feel bored. Dialogue itself is very vivid. You don't find it boring. This is a perfect spring read, and it definitely feels like a love letter to the world around us. And a hate letter to the English society. Now, if you have been a viewer of this channel, you know that I am a lover of Evelyn Waugh. Something about his novels just charmed me, and now I cannot stop talking about him. I'm now going to introduce you to Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. Everybody and their mother heard about this book. I still feel the urge to talk about it because it's that good. And people heard about it for a reason. This novel is set in the Roaring 20s, just before the Second World War. Charles Ryder, the main character, now a soldier, finds himself reminiscing on his past as he revisits a half-forgotten place, Brideshead. As his memories bring the family mansion back to life, the reader becomes acquainted with the Catholic family that used to inhabit this very mansion. The story of this family unfolds the reader, enclosing him in its walls. We are no longer on the battlefield. Instead, we are surrounded with the university decorations, luxurious dinner parties, and a beautiful countryside. Charles Ryder takes the last glimpse not only on his past, but also on the people who composed this past. And we become acquainted with the Marchmane's family. Sebastian Flynn, flamboyant and very rarely sober. His sister Julia, remote and elegant, and Charles Riley, of course, has to fall in love with her. Their mother, and an estranged and mysterious father. This family changes the neat order of Charles' life as an exemplary student, redirecting him towards the pleasures of life elsewhere. Art, champagne, dinner parties, filled with warm candlelit evenings, passionate love confessions in the garden, drunk conversations under the shades of trees. I found this novel to be a treasure in of itself because it is a perfect depiction and representation of the spirit of the Roaring Twenties. Personally, I just loved that period. Maybe that's why I love this novel so much, but something about Roaring Twenties, I will read any book about this era. Not only it focuses on the causes of the Roaring Twenties, but also on its consequences. I suggest you read this book under a blossoming tree with a glass of champagne and take a sip every time Sebastian does something frivolous. You'll be drunk in no time. When I think of spring, my mind immediately goes to the hours I spent outdoors, exploring the countryside. Reading Little Women by Louisa May Alcott is exactly that exploration. You find yourself refreshed, alive, and renewed after reading her books. We are introduced into a family. There are 4 sisters. Meg, who is romantic and beautiful. Jo, who aspires to be a writer, tomboyish and ambitious, yet sensitive and quite idealistic. Amy, an ambitious painter, quite spoiled, and when I read the reviews, not many people seem to like her, although I still do. And Beth, who's very good at playing piano and is passionate for music, yet her health state is very fragile. I think one of the reasons why this book became so popular, especially among young girls, young women, is you will find in each character a piece of you. Each sister represents a corner of your soul, and you will relate eventually to all of them. This book is a brilliant depiction of girlhood and womanhood, its sorrows, its joys. Womanhood is fluid, diverse, and evasive. We cannot put it into words, we cannot describe it, we cannot enclose it in a cage. And I think this is what most of the writers tend to do with their female characters. They try to put a woman into a sort of a box and look at her through that box, through that lens of the essence of womanhood. However, here, Louisa May Alcott portrays a woman in such a way that you find yourself thinking, I experienced the same self-doubt, this passion, the joys and the sorrows experienced by March family deeply resonate with you, and as you become closer to them, discovering the inner dynamics of the family, the jealousy, the fights, the teary-eyed conversations of sisters, you want to stay with them, you want to keep them company, you want to become a part of their family. This book in general feels like a motherly embrace, and it may be just me and my sentimentality, but I loved every bit of this book. And I remember I read this book when I was just 12 years old, and it definitely was an essential read at a time. If you're a girl, especially if you're a girl, read this book. I beg of you. Some books just stay with you and they stay close to your heart, and this one is definitely one of those. This is a book I would give to my daughter at any point of her life. This is a book I would give to my mother too. A time spent reading this book is filled with warmth, hope, and harmony. And it's this sense of harmony that I long for during the springtime. Here you have it. This is one of those classics that you just have to read in spring. I don't make the rules. Next book is truly one of a kind. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I think in every video I either talk about Virginia Woolf or Evelyn Waugh, and someday I'll stop. Someday I will, I promise you, but not today. Not today. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to jump from one life to another, shedding old skin yet living through centuries? Well, Virginia Woolf is about to share a secret with you. The novel is centered around a protagonist, Orlando, who at the beginning is a romantic aristocrat who finds himself enjoying his time at the court of Queen Elizabeth, writing poems and being being pretty popular among the women, if you know what I mean. Then 2 kings later, and you did not mishear me, 2 kings later, he finds himself transformed into a charming ambassador who is sent to Constantinople. And he's also a woman now. Not only Wolf is completely astounding at changing the pace, the tone of voice, the narrative, her lyricism and her wit are truly on another level in this one. Every description of a landscape begs to be savored, and every dialogue scene is vivid and is a perfect blend of wit and seriousness. I think one of the reasons why people are so afraid of classics too is they find it hard to believe that classics can be playful, fun, and you can actually enjoy them. One thing you will never be in the company of Virginia Woolf is bored. Forget about Netflix. Read a Virginia Woolf novel instead. This book feels like a breath of fresh air on a spring day, and the same breath of fresh air is going to keep you sane during the first month of spring. I hope you enjoyed this book chat. I sure did. As always, if you have any other classic books that you want me to talk about, leave them in the comments below. Also, I am waiting for your classic recommendations because I'm in the mood for some classics. I want to explore, I want to go to a bookstore and buy myself lots of good books. So if you have any book recommendations, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you want me to do a part 2, I will. Absolutely, there's no question about it. And if you want me to talk about contemporary novels to read in spring, let me know because there's a lot of them and I want to share them with you. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you left it a like and subscribe because we have a fun time here. As always, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I wish you all the best and bye!